All right, and we're live. So, had a little bit of technical difficulty there, but anyway, so this is the first installment of a segment that I'm going to call Tangent Tuesdays. So, for Tangent Tuesdays, the concept is I'm going to pick a topic and I'm just going to sort of riff on it. This week, I've done a little bit of research. I'm actually going to address an event that happened 2 weeks ago, 2 weekends ago, as of the time of this recording. So there was a special boxing match between a martial arts instructor by the name of DK Yoo and a retired mixed martial arts fighter named Bradley Scott. For some background, Mr. Yu has gotten some notoriety over the past few years. He's been promoting videos of him demonstrating his martial arts skills. Now, a lot of those demos basically involve him executing a punch or a kick or something like that against rather compliant demo dummies. And those look good and they got a lot of attention, but for a while people have been asking to see whether or not he could actually they've been questioning whether or not he could actually fight. So initially, at least as far back as September, there was a fight arranged between Mr. Yu and Zhu Xiaodong, who's sort of infamous. He's a mixed martial arts fighter out of China. He got his reputation from um, sort of from punching people who claimed that they had magical skills, who, as it turns out, did not. Um, Basically, he's on a mission to expose frauds. Excuse me. And this seemed, from all outside parties, like it was going to be an appropriate matchup, if not an interesting one, because the guy who's known for his demos was going to be facing off against a guy who built his reputation on, you know, taking up arms against people who were known for their demos, but didn't actually have the skills to back up any fighting ability. Zhao, Mr. Zhu, I think, Zhu Xiaodong pulled out of the fight. I don't know why. Um, Maybe even saying that he pulled out is inappropriate. The fight had to be rescheduled. Mr. Yu had to find another opponent, enter Mr. Scott. So Mr. Scott had fought mixed martial arts for several years, including in the UFC. He retired in, I want to say 2017 or 2018. He's also got a channel on YouTube called Fight Bible. And, he took the fight on short notice. He's bigger than Zhu Jiadong, bigger than Mr. Yu. And anyway, the fight happened. And the way it basically went down is this. I would encourage anyone interested in the fight to actually check it out. But how it went down was Mr. Yu threw between 20 and 30 punches the entire 3-minute round boxing match. This is a rough estimate from what I saw the other night when I watched it. Most of the fight consisted of Mr. Scott chasing him down and Mr. Yu winding up against the ropes or in a corner and then covering up while Mr. Scott threw punches mostly to the body. The punches to the body were hard. Mr. Scott also occasionally would throw punches to the head, those those didn't seem to have the same pop on them as the body punches did. Anyway, throughout the course of the fight, Mr. Yu would also look to get into the clinch in order to prevent any further damage from punches. He clinched a lot. Um, he also slipped a lot. And I think some of this was assisted by Mr. Scott. If guys like diving low for the legs on an MMA fighter, it seems only natural that his response would be to sort of carry him past him, which occurred a couple of times. In fact, I think it was the fifth round where Mr. Scott was, from what I was able to tell, actually docked a point for, throwing Mr. Yu while they were in the clinch. Could be mistaken about that, but that it looked like that was what the ref was signaling from my angle. In the end, Mr. Scott got the decision. Again, I'd encourage any viewers to actually watch the fight, but this is more about the reaction to the fight. So, Mr. Yu's critics pretty much saw this as a predictable outcome, with the exception of they thought Mr. Scott would probably knock him out before the fight was over. But the criticism against Mr. Yu is you can do fancy stuff against people who aren't fighting back. Are you prepared to fight against somebody who's actually trying to take your head off? And the answer was mostly no. Mr. Yu's supporters looked at things differently. I would refer to most of these as excuses, frankly. The notion that, Mr. Scott was heavier. Okay. He was also not in fighting shape. The notion that Mr. Yu is not a boxer by trade. Well, neither is Mr. Scott. And also, on Mr. Yu's own YouTube channel, and I think in an interview on his website, he will talk about studying various martial arts and mentions boxing among them. So he wasn't a boxer, but he had studied boxing. I think with a claim like that, it wouldn't be unexpected that he would at least be prepared for a boxing match. And there were a few other little hiccups in there. But the thing is, there's a commonality between what the critics are saying and what the supporters are saying. And that commonality basically comes down to you can't do something that you're not good at. That seems like very circular logic. But yeah, when it comes to physical training, when you look across many different athletic endeavors, something that comes up a lot is specificity. If you want to get better at hitting a baseball, you need to spend time in a batting cage, right? Or having someone throw baseballs at you. You're not going to become a better baseball player without incorporating hitting a ball into your training. You can do supplementary exercises designed to build the appropriate muscles and, need to get good at sprinting to go from base to base. So we translate that into martial arts training, right? Punching someone who's not punching you back, who isn't supposed to punch you back, isn't going to be of very much help when there's somebody out there whose intention is to hit you as hard as they can. Although, again, in this instance, I do think Mr. Scott probably pulled the punches that he was throwing to the head most of the time. Um, Back on subject, the thing about martial arts is that there was no agreed upon universal metric for determining what makes a good martial artist. So, as an example, let's take Jet Li. I think a lot of people would consider him a good martial artist based on the physical skills that he shows in his wushu tournaments back when he was younger, as well as the movies these days. He clearly demonstrates excellent muscular control, good technique, good form. I also think that people would agree that former UFC welterweight champion George St. Pierre is a good martial artist. But he's a good martial artist in a very different way. He's good at taking different elements of martial arts and combining them into a format where he can seamlessly transition from, he can fake a kick that he learned in Muay Thai, turn it into a punch he learned in boxing, and set up a takedown he learned in wrestling, and go for a guard pass that he learned in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And he can do so in a way that's completely logical and not contradictory to any of those disciplines that he studied, right? The difference is we know that George St. Pierre can fight, you know, and you may want to put qualifiers on there like, well, he fights in an arena in a very controlled environment, and there are certain techniques that are off the table. I can concede that, but he can punch and kick and throw and choke someone who's trying to do the same thing to him, who's also a really good athlete. It's not the equivalent of the same type of good martial artist that Jet Li is. So, hello, baby. I got a visitor. It's a cat. So, I think as martial artists, sometimes we get caught up in the idea that if I'm a good martial artist, I must be a good fighter, because at least the physical side of martial arts is about getting better at committing violence or at least protecting yourself from acts of violence, usually by committing violence. Um, but there's a difference between being good at forms, being good at breaking, being morally upstanding, because some people will consider that part of being a good martial artist. There's a difference between doing all of that and being good at navigating violent situations. And I think that that's what we're seeing with Mr. Yoo. Is I've seen many people be complimentary of his body mechanics. And, oh, clearly he's been able to draw from this martial art and that martial art. And, more power to him for that. But at the end of the day, what he's doing is a demonstration. And it doesn't make him a good fighter. It doesn't mean that he can't fight if he also includes fight prep training. But the ability to demonstrate good body mechanics, the ability to demonstrate, excellent muscular control and precision while you're doing a form, the ability to, break a stack of concrete blocks. None of that means that you are a good fighter. It means that you're good at breaking a stack of concrete blocks. It means that you're good at, imitating the movements of an animal or something. But it's not the same. It's not equivalent as, having the skill and experience to navigate punches coming into your face. So I know how to deal with that because I've dealt with it so much in training. With learning how to deal with the adrenaline dump, being fit enough to, move your body the way it needs to be moved under that sort of pressure, to have a strategy to know, if I fake this here, this guy's going to respond in this way and open up this other target. It's a Harper. It's a it's a Harper. Harper. My finger's not. There we go. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, as martial artists, we need to get better at accepting the limitations of our training. And once again, I'm reminded of and would recommend watching Ian Abernethy's The Martial Map. It's on YouTube. And um, he points out in that there's a difference between training for self-defense, training for fighting, and training to study the martial art. And again, as martial artists, it's natural to think, you know, if I'm learning the martial art, I must be getting better at fighting. Because I'm getting better at my forms. I can definitely kick better than I could last year. Why wouldn't I be able to use that against another human being? And you can't. Don't try anything for the first time in combat if you don't have the experience to know, you know, I can stop a takedown because I've practiced stopping takedowns against people who were trying to take me down as hard as they could. If you don't have the experience of, you know, I know if a bunch of punches are coming at me, I can shell up and move my head and I can weather that storm because you've never had to weather that storm, then you should not believe that you can just automatically do it when the time comes. To reach way back and use a Bruce Lee analogy, if I practice swimming on dry land, I shouldn't expect to be a good swimmer. It wouldn't work. No one would reasonably expect that. But, you know, people in the martial arts, have these weird expectations of, you know, um, I can hold a horse stance for 3 hours. Therefore, I'm a good fighter. If you thought about that for more than a moment, you'd understand the one doesn't translate to the other. It's impressive, it's an accomplishment, and good for you. It should be applauded, you know, but it's not fighting. So, is my volume even on? Anyway, all that to say that when you practice martial arts, realize that you are going to do best what you have practiced the most. If you haven't engaged in fighting or whatever type of sparring you're doing, look at it with a critical eye. Am I stopping short of contact? Then if I'm in a real fight, am I going to stop short of contact? I'm not recommending everybody, goes out, just, puts in a mouth guard and goes, bare knuckle with their training partners. None of that would make sense. But at some point, with gradual steps, you need to get to the spot where, every so often, you're like, we're going to throw hard punches, not necessarily trying to knock each other out, but like 70 or 80% power. You got to learn what it's like to get hit and know that you need to respond. You know, you got to know what it's like to fight off a choke of somebody who's trying to choke you unconscious. Hence Jujitsu Randori. It's fantastic. So every once in a while, it doesn't have to be a big part of your training, but if you want training that translates into that practical use, you need to practice fighting. You need to practice being good at violence and dealing with violence in order for it to work for you. You know, and not everybody has to do this. If you want to be an expert at forms, if you want to just, I like throwing, 540 kicks, and that's my goal in doing martial arts is to do something cool. That's fine. Whatever your interest is. I'm looking to get more in touch with, the Bushido code and all that. Great. But this fight was a stark lesson in the idea that you have to practice something to be any good at it, because you can look awesome in practice as much as you want, but unless you put in the effort to prepare for your worst case scenario, for the thing you're actually trying to do. I want to be able to defend myself against this. I want to know that I can hit somebody with power. Unless you're putting in the time to actually do that, you're not going to get anywhere. Anyway, that's all I got. Like I said, Tangent Tuesdays. It sort of went on tangents a bit. We'll try to do this once a month, and maybe we'll go a little bit smoother next time. Had a little bit of trouble setting up this time. Anyway, so thank you for watching my YouTube channel, and goodbye.